hundreds of years ago, there was a giant who lived in the neighborhood, and he would block the river with his hand when a ship came by. And if they didn't pay the toll, he'd smash their ship and the crew would drown. So of course people paid. But one day there was a young ship captain who thought that that wasn't the right way to do things. He decided he would challenge the giant. And he had his sword ready, and when the giant commands him to pay the toll, he refuses. And so the giant, raises his hand to smash the ship, but he pulls out his sword and he cuts the giant's hand off. The giant falls to the ground, and he grabs this hand and he throws it. And that's where the city gets its name, because the Dutch word for hand is hand. And there's an slightly older Dutch word for to throw, and it's werpen. Hand, werpen, Antwerpen. And that's what the name of the city means. It's the throwing of the hand, and that's what the statue is. It's that young man, and he's throwing the hand, and they've got the giants down there underneath him. You just see him standing up and just throwing the hand as hard as he can, and that's such a cool statue to see. If you live in Antwerpen, you've got to go and see that statue. The Belgians and the Dutch, they share a lot. They were the same country for a very long time, and so, in large measure, they share similar food, similar cultural ideas. I would say that Belgians tend to be a little more shy than Dutch people. With Dutch people, they're kind of a little standoffish, but once you get through that, you're good. They'll take better care of you than the family dog. That's this Dutch mentality. They're in my house, they're a guest, they are special. And with Belgians, it's the same, but you have a lot more work to do. After you get through the first layer of shyness, there's a second layer you have to get through. So it takes a little longer. Belgians respond maybe a little more slowly to that kind of thing than Dutch people do, but they do respond, I think. And as far as just, food and kind of other things, it's very, very similar.
The Netherlands used to be part of France. They were conquered a few times, and they have a lot of French influence in their language. It is a Germanic language, but they use a lot of words that are just French. And then as you go further south into Belgium, the north half, again, even more French influence. The southern half of Belgium speaks French already. And so you can just see kind of the transition over the years. I forget the dates exactly, so I won't try to throw them out, but when they actually split, the countries did, it just made a big difference to the development of the country. Heck, even the flag for the Netherlands is the same colors as the French flag, just reversed in orientation. The northern half of Belgium actually is the more profitable, from what I understand. The economy is just doing a lot better. Some of the wealthiest people in the world live in Belgium, and it's more in Flanders, the northern half. The southern half, is where they have the capital in Brussels, and French is like the kind of more official language of the country. Dutch is also, of course, recognized. They call it Flemish or Vlaams. And their accent, or the Vlaams, is, there's a lot more French influence. Their accent is a lot softer. Their G's instead of a G, it's like a G. And they use more French words, especially those that are, a little bit older. They would use words, and what are they saying? Well, it's a French word that they would normally there was a Dutch word for. It is very common for those that speak Dutch in Belgium to learn French, whereas those that speak French in the southern half don't very often learn Dutch. Maybe a few. They just, they're less likely to travel up there. I have seen those French people that travel up for vacation or whatever, but it's just more common for the Dutch people to have to learn another language. And that's also the similar trend for the Netherlands as well. They make it a point to learn other languages, and those coming in aren't really expected to know Dutch. They just assume it. They assume that you won't if you're a tourist. And like those coming from other countries, it's always a struggle to get them to learn, because I've met people from other countries, both in Belgium and the Netherlands, that have lived there for 20 years and they hardly speak any Dutch. They can hardly, get a few simple sentences, not very well said, just because they don't necessarily need to. You can get around with English. You don't really integrate yourself in the society, but you can manage. And for them, that's good enough. And so it's just interesting to see how their culture is. I'd say if you really want to become a part of it or understand it more, you really have to make a point to learn their language, learn the way they do things. I don't know.
One of the favorite times of my mission was serving in Antwerp. I had the opportunity to serve there for 4.5 months, and that is a beautiful, blessed city. And some of the interesting things about Antwerp is that it's a port city. It's a city that has long been one of the centers of trade of the world, and with the diamond trade in particular. If you walk out of Antwerp Centraal, the train station there, you see going this way and that way, diamond stores. Diamonds, rings, jewelry, you name it, it's sold about 10 steps outside of the train station. And it's one of the world capitals of the diamond trade, and because of that, you have a lot of people from all over the world. Antwerp is a city that has a lot of immigrants. There are a lot of refugees that make it to Europe and that settle in Belgium, and a lot of them will go to Antwerp. I know there are a lot of people from Ghana there. I love to teach them. They were just so much fun to teach, to get to know all these different cultures, all these different people. And when I was there in Antwerp, we had a car, but we also made use of the public transportation there, and it's pretty good. They have tram systems, and if you can really learn to understand the tram systems, there's a tram that goes from A to B, and it just goes back and forth. If you can really understand that and figure out where each of the trams goes to and from, that will help you a lot to get around Antwerp quickly. If you know where the stations are and where the different trams go, that helps a lot. It will save you a lot of time, because even when there's traffic, the trams go through on time. The traffic has to stop, and the trams get priority. And then they also have buses. If there's somewhere a tram doesn't go, a bus will get you there just as well. And so the public transportation system in Antwerp is very good. One of the really cool things about Antwerp is their centrum. They have, or the city center. It's gorgeous. There's these beautiful old buildings, this tall, towering construction, a nice, wide, open plaza areas. It's a beautiful city center, and it's, even if you don't buy anything, I would recommend going shopping there. It's an amazing place. They have all kinds of great things. But I would definitely recommend going there just to look at it and just to take pictures to remember, because it is a beautiful place. If you really want to see some interesting things and you want to get some cool souvenirs from Antwerp, there's a place you can go. It's called the Groene Plaats. The green place in English doesn't really make sense, but if you go there, and I recommend this, they have kind of, some tourist shops in the area. So if you want to get some souvenirs, you can go there, but that's where their city hall is, their Stadshuis. And that's a gorgeous building. It has gilded statues and flags hanging there. It's an amazing building. And in the middle of the central plaza area, there's a statue. And that statue is connected to Antwerp's history. And the legend goes that Antwerp it's always been a port city, it's always been a shipping city. But the legend goes that hundreds of years ago, there was a giant who lived in the neighborhood. And he would block the river with his hand when a ship came by. And if they didn't pay the toll, he'd smash their ship and the crew would drown. So of course people paid. But one day there was a young ship captain who thought that wasn't the right way to do things. He decided he would challenge the giant. And he had his sword ready, and when the giant commands him to pay the toll, he refuses. And so the giant, raises his hand to smash the ship, but he pulls out his sword and he cuts the giant's hand off. The giant falls to the ground, and he grabs this hand and he throws it. And that's where the city gets its name, because the Dutch word for hand is hand. And there's an slightly older Dutch word for to throw, and it's werpen. Hand, werpen, Antwerpen. And that's what the name of the city means. It's the throwing of the hand. And that's what the statue is. It's that young man, and he's throwing the hand. And they've got the giants down there underneath him. You just see him standing up and just throwing the hand as hard as he can. And that's such a cool statue to see. There's a lot of different trades that go on in Antwerp. It's a very normal city in that aspect. I think definitely the diamond trade, like I mentioned a little earlier, is very big in Antwerp. Jewelry and diamonds are always to find in Antwerp. Antwerp in general, it's a good place. There are places that you definitely need to be a little more careful about where you go late at night. Antwerp as a whole is not particularly plagued by any type of crime. You just have to, use your healthy understanding. It's not very hard to be safe in Antwerp, not at all.